You hear it before you see it. A single cannon shot rolling across flat water in the early morning, and every man on deck stops what he is doing at exactly the same moment. The cook drops his ladle. The man splicing rope in the bow lets it fall. Even the captain, who has heard this sound more times than he can count, goes very still for just a fraction of a second before his training takes over. You have never heard a cannon fired in anger in your life. You have approximately 4 minutes before the next one lands close enough to matter. And nothing, not your courage, not your strength, not anything you have ever done or believed about yourself, has prepared you for what the next 2 hours are going to ask of you. The Golden Age of Piracy runs roughly from 1680 to 1730, 50 years during which the Caribbean, the Atlantic, and the waters of the Indian Ocean became the hunting ground of somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 men. They were not the pirates of Hollywood. They were not swaggering men with parrots and unlimited rum-making witty remarks before sword fights choreographed for an audience. They were sailors, most of them former Navy or merchant men who knew the sea the way you know your own house. The battle was the job. Everything else was waiting for the battle. And if you had somehow found yourself aboard a pirate vessel in 1710, as an ordinary crew member with no combat experience, you would not have survived your first one. Here is exactly why. The ship that fired that cannon is half a mile away and closing. Your captain has made his assessment. He knows the other ship's size, her gun count, her likely crew complement, and her nationality from the flag she is flying, which may or may not be the flag she actually represents. And now the pirate vessel transforms. What was a ship is becoming a weapon. Hammocks are pulled from below and stuffed into the netting along the ship's sides, not for comfort, not by accident. The cook throws water on his galley fire because a lit fire during a cannon battle is not a cooking implement, it is a fuse attached to the entire ship. The gunners are already below in the gun deck, running out the cannons through the open ports, the trucks squealing on the wooden deck as the guns roll forward into position. You are given a weapon. If you are lucky, it is a musket. You take what you are given and you stand where you are told to stand, and you wait. The other ship is a quarter mile away now. You can see men moving on her deck. This is the moment your body begins doing things you did not ask it to do. Nobody tells you about the noise. The sound of a broadside from a ship of war in the age of sail is not a sound your body has any reference point for. It is a physical event. The concussion your chest, compresses your lungs, rattles your vision, and for a fraction of a second scrambles the part of your brain responsible for deciding what is happening and what to do about it. Men who experienced their first broadside describe the sensation as being struck, not hearing something, but being hit by something. Your ears begin ringing after the first exchange. By the third exchange, the ringing is so complete that you cannot hear orders being shouted 3 feet from your face. You are reading lips. You are watching hands. You are operating on instinct and the movements of the men around you in a world that has gone almost entirely silent. The gunpowder smoke from the cannons fills the gun deck within minutes and begins rising to the main deck, mixing with the smoke from muskets being fired from the rigging above you, until visibility across the deck of your own ship drops to 10, sometimes 5 feet. The deck is trying to kill you independently of the enemy. When a cannonball strikes the hull or the deck of a wooden vessel, it does not simply punch a clean hole, it explodes the wood it hits into splinters, traveling at speeds comparable to the ball itself. Naval surgeons of the period recorded more casualties from wooden splinters than from cannonballs directly. Splinters 18 inches long, the rigging above you is also now a weapon. A cannonball through the rigging brings down rope, wood, and canvas in quantities and at speeds that kill and crush and trap. Ships carried sand specifically for this purpose, spreading it on the deck before battle to give footing, but the sand runs out and the blood does not. You slip. You catch yourself on a rope. The rope is connected to a block that is falling. You move. The block hits the deck where you were standing hard enough to crack the planking. You have been in this battle for 11 minutes. If the battle goes well, if your ship closes on the enemy successfully and the grappling hooks find their purchase and the two hulls grind together, Hollywood gives you elegant sword fights, one-on-one duels with room to move and time to think, and opponents who wait for you to recover your footing. What actually happens when a pirate crew boards an enemy vessel is a compression of 80 to 100 men into a space roughly the size of a tennis court, most of them armed with weapons designed not for dueling, but for killing in crowds. The cutlass, which is short enough to use in oppressive bodies where a longer blade would be useless. You have one shot in your pistol. One. The noise on the boarding deck is different from the cannon noise. It is human noise, screaming in English and French and Spanish and Dutch all at the same time. You cannot think. In the first minutes of close combat, the thinking part of your brain goes almost completely offline. If you have spent your previous life doing something other than close quarters combat, you do not survive if you are hit, and the odds in a serious engagement are roughly 1 in 3 that you will be. You go below to the surgeon.
We have got you now. Lay out here.
The ship's surgeon in 1710 is not a doctor in any sense you would recognize. The surgeon's table is a wooden board. The operation takes between 90 seconds and 3 minutes from first cut to cauterization because speed is the only anesthesia available. The surgical instruments are wiped between patients with a cloth. You are conscious for all of this. There is rum if the ship has it. Usually the ship has it. Here is what the movies got right. The men who chose this life knew all of it. Most of them had served on Navy vessels or merchant ships where the conditions were similar and the pay was worse, and the officers could have them flogged for looking at the wrong moment at the wrong man. The pirate ship was, in many cases, the most democratic institution in the world in 1710. The crew voted on targets. The articles, the pirate code, specified exactly how plunder would be divided, and compensation written into the contract for every specific injury. So many pieces of 8 for a lost right arm, fewer for the left. They were violent men operating a violent enterprise in a violent age. They were also, many of them, men who had decided at some specific moment that they would rather risk the hanging at execution dock than continue to be owned by men who would never risk anything themselves. You would not have survived their battle, but understanding why they fought it, that is something worth knowing. The sea is still out there. The ships are gone. But the choice those men made between safety that cost everything and freedom that cost everything, that choice has never stopped being made.